Hey everyone, KYT back again with another video. In this one, we're going to be talking about dividends and yield a bit because I think I now have the best way that I want to explain it to a beginner and how they want to use it for their investing journey. On top of that, we are going to be talking about capital erosion, something that we have not discussed on this channel yet. And let's get right to it. Actually, before I do that, I got to tell everyone that I've updated my beginner's cheat sheet. It's a great one for frequently asked questions from beginners, so definitely check it out. Check out the link in the video description below. Let's take a few seconds to summarize what we think a complete beginner should do. They should invest with broad diversification in mind through index funds. That is because stock picking is hard. And here we see Larry Swedroe, a very respected name in finance, on this page. And he's done it on numerous podcasts to talk about the research he's done into stock picking. And here in this article that was released in 2020, how bad is active management? It's bad. It's getting worse. Every year, S&P Dow Jones Indices does a study in active versus passive management. Last year, they found that after 10 years, 85% of large cap funds underperform the S&P 500. And after 15 years, nearly 92% are trailing the index. So it's not just hard for the average investor like you and me. It's hard for actual professionals that are running these funds at a professional level, supposedly. And nowadays, beginners have access to a ton of different information, including YouTube content, sort of like what I'm doing right now, TikTokers who have strong opinions on different stocks and ETFs. So you can easily get overwhelmed by information. You don't know what to buy. But it's important to know that the baseline strategy is indexing. And anything that deviates from that, that tells you that, oh, this stock is really good, this ETF is better for people of this age, this is an active opinion. And as we've seen with this stat, and you'll see the stat repeated all the time if you're in any investing forum, these opinions are unlikely to be that correct, because if they were true, then it would be easy for people to gain an edge on the market. Everyone would just buy these funds that supposedly perform better. So anyone that tells you that something is going to beat the market, you have to be able to, take their take with some level of skepticism. This post is actually what inspired this video. I'm going to go through this really quick. I look at my higher yield for the dividends that I can reinvest. I'm also a bit late to the game, so higher yield is something I heard was a good idea for this stage of my life where I don't have 40 years to wait for slow growth. That said, I figure I'd toss a bit into some more growth-oriented ETFs anyways, as I feel they are perhaps more stable and will grow, just not for as long as they would if I had started in my 20s or 30s. I'm still a bit torn as to which to invest heavier into. I don't have the money for aggressive high money investing. I'm trickling in as much as I can when I can. Way to go. I think that's important. It doesn't really matter what stage you're at and where you are, as long as you're in the right path right now. That's awesome. There's a lot of concepts there to talk about, and hopefully I go over the most important ones briefly and comprehensively enough while keeping this video relatively short. So the main thing I want to stress is that total return is hard to predict, and that's obvious, or else it's easy to beat the market. Even though some people tend to use like the S&P historical performances and say, oh, well, it did 10% in the past per year, it's going to do 10% in the future. I talk about in other videos why that's past performance is not a reliable way to predict the future. So a dividend ETF and a non-dividend ETF, their total returns can be similar and they're hard to predict. And these are the formulas that define how to calculate their total return. And it's a common belief that a dividend strategy allows you to compound faster or get more shares and you're reinvesting. So you feel like you should be making faster progress when really total return is all that matters. As long as your total return percentage is not different from a non-dividend ETF, you are not progressing faster. So in that case, how you're supposed to view the non-dividend ETF is as if they just automatically reinvested their dividend back into the company. And this is not me speculating. This is just how the math works. So to put it in concrete, make a concrete example, let's say 8% is the total return for both the dividend strategy and the non-dividend ETF. And let's just assume if you invest in a dividend ETF, you get roughly 4% dividend. So for the total return to be 8%, the capital appreciation has to be 4% as defined by the formula. And it has to be 8% for the non-dividend ETF. So here, if you're just reinvesting the 4%, you're at the same place as if a non-dividend ETF had the same total return. Okay, so the key part is trying to find out the best strategy that maximizes the total return, not the number of shares and not the number of dividends that you get. Now, a lot of people argue that dividends for some ETFs or some strategies are stable. For example, they think that they can, for the longest time, have a strategy that returns them around 3 to 5%. And that's definitely possible. I've definitely seen portfolios like that and a strategy that can keep a stable dividend income. But if you look at the formula, we know total return is hard to predict. It has to be. For this to be true, that means capital appreciation has to be the unpredictable component, right? You can't have stable component plus stable component equals something that is hard to predict unless you think total return is predictable. So I think that is a mistake a lot of dividend investors make, is that they just assume capital appreciation will be okay, it will rebound, it's predictable, it's safe, or it's gonna break even. But what's really happening is they're looking back at a fund that has done really well and assuming that it's gonna keep doing well while having a stable dividend. We know that's impossible because that would make that ETF a bit too good, and we know that it's impossible to predict the market because everyone would just invest in this ETF if it could have strong capital appreciation that's stable and a stable dividend. Unless the return is really low, it just wouldn't make sense. So if we look at the popular VDY ETF, we can see broken down by years that the income here is between 3 to 5%. It's a predictable, solid 3 to 5% since inception. But then, like I said, what has to be true is that the capital return has to vary a lot. It just has to. And you can see it goes from 3%, -4, 31, -5, 15, -13. Overall, it's going to be positive because if you look back, I think cumulatively in 10 years, it's been able to go over 100%. It's important not to have hindsight bias and know that this is an ETF that has done well in the past, but it goes to show why you have to be aware of how these components work and why the capital return here is just highly variable. Now let's cover capital erosion briefly. And that's why high yield funds, there's all this concern about capital erosion. Because if you look again, back to the formula, if the dividend component is 12% and we expect the total return, like a good total return is 10%, then the capital appreciation for the formula to work, if you do the math, would have to be -2%, right? That's why high yield cannot be sustainable at a high rate for a long period of time, because it just wouldn't make sense based on what we understand the total return to be. This is why you have all these passive income investors that promote or talk about high yield funds. They have a lot of videos on sustainability, capital erosion, NAV erosion. Here, high yield ETFs equals NAV erosion, ? Things like that. And it's just based on the formula. Based on the formula, if something is high yield, like gives you yield higher than what we expect the market to return you, and it does that for the long period of time, the capital growth probably was negative. It probably went down. It just has to. That's just how the math works. The fund is not necessarily sketchy in any sense. It's just the way things go. In the other part of the post that inspired this video is this question of, okay, I have this many years to live. What should I invest in? What type of stock? And it can get overwhelming because there are so many different opinions. Even the original post talked about how maybe dividends would accelerate their growth more, and they don't have that much time, so they should do that. Accelerate, get more dividends, get more shares so that they can reach their goals faster. And then you have posts from good people. This person I like. Let me read it quickly. I'm not a dividend investor, but this is cool. If you know me, you know I'm not a huge fan of dividend stocks. There's a few reasons why. My age and personal situation. As a 20-year-old, I'm young and able to take on more risk in my portfolio. Dividend stocks and their stability is not really what I'm after. So now this person is saying dividend stocks are more stable so that you shouldn't have them when you're young. An opposite view of the first post that we looked at. Quite interesting, right? And in my research, there's just no reason to go one way or another. Dividend stocks can be seen as more stable, probably because of their dividend payment, but they can be very volatile depending on the economic conditions and the specific crisis that we're facing. For example, we've seen them crash really hard due to interest rate adjustments. Dividend stocks tend to be very sensitive to interest rates. And the reason you want to be diversified is because dividend stocks tend to be from certain sectors like finance, energy, utilities, consumer staples. So you don't want to lack that exposure in your portfolio. And that's why this is an approach recommended by a lot of people to be diversified, whether that be via very common recommendation, and XQT, or a combo of the two is what I've seen recommended that I think makes the most sense from an academic standpoint, because I know all of us want to accelerate our growth. We want to do even better, but doing better implies that you can beat the market, which most professionals can't even do. So instead of trying to do that, focus on saving more, making more through other means, staying patient and invested in a great strategy, and hopefully it will allow you to reach your goals. With that said, I'll see you in the next one.